addiction, prevention, recovery.
Welcome to the Recovery Rebirth Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Recovery Rebirth Podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Jillian.
Hello, audience, and welcome to our podcast on Overwhelm, which also is almost synonymous with burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have sustained overwhelm for a period of time, you get burnt out. And
Yes.
It's a very real problem, and it'll lead into another podcast that we'll talk about at some point, which is self-care.
Mm-hmm.
We may even touch on it a little bit in this episode, but we'll probably do a whole episode on self-care techniques and stuff because there's plenty of info there.
Mm-hmm.
But what is this feeling of overwhelm? Well, imagine, Jillian, you've felt overwhelmed where you've been swamped or submerged or engulfed in life in general, whether it be work or it could be with relationships, it could be with family, it could be death of a loved one, it could be whatever. But all of life hits all at once, and you have this intense emotion that something is so challenging it is difficult to manage or to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you kick us off, Jillian, with perhaps a story of overwhelm, and then I'll share what I've been going through for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, my friend, it sounds like this is very topical for you today. Well, currently, today, right now in this moment, I'm glad to say I don't feel overwhelmed. That could change on a dime. But there have definitely been times throughout my life. I'm thinking of a couple different seasons of life. One in my 20s, when I had started, like late 20s, I'd started a new job. And my then partner, I was in a very psychologically abusive relationship, and that was getting pretty bad. My grandma was dying, and then I had I got involved in a minor car accident, but we were driving along the highway to a training about 45 minutes north, and I got sort of cut off by a semi. There was construction coming up, and so it was either a semi or some construction barrels, so I chose the construction barrel because it seemed softer, and it took off my side window, and everything kind of went in slow-mo. And it was weird. I got like ultra calm at the moment. But then when I pulled off and made sure everybody was okay, so nobody was injured, and called my insurance company. But when we got to the training, and I was sitting there, like after I was able to sit with myself for a minute, I had my first panic attack. I haven't had many of those in my life, but it's like everything just hit me all at once. And I had no idea how much that was like the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess.
What was the panic attack like for you?
For me, it almost felt like I was on drugs. I felt like things felt very surreal. My heart was kind of racing. I felt like shallow breaths, and it was just it was a very freaky experience. But yeah, I just felt like really disconnected from reality. And so that was one point in my life. And another period was in my 30s when I was involved in an alcoholic relationship and dealing with getting deep into my codependency with, the drama that his drinking brought into my life, but then how I would react to that, and the checking his phone to see if he was texting his exes and looking for bottles. And I was also, work was super stressful. I was working for an active alcoholic at the time who was a very impatient, angry man. Lots of stress at work. I was a volunteer-aholic, which I realized later once I got into recovery that, that was my way, my escapism from life. It looks great on the outside. To the untrained eye, to somebody not in recovery, they're like, wow, look at Jillian. She really cares about her community, which is true. But I was also using that volunteerism as an escape from reality that was so overwhelming, and also to maybe find some sense of purpose or validation. I don't know. So that was a very overwhelming time of my life. And I felt like at that point I was what they call, I've heard, an emotional drunk. I learned that phrase early on in recovery. And that was me. I was just super reactive to everything. The alcoholic in my life, his behavior would affect me in a way I didn't respond to things. I would react, and I was an emotional drunk. And that was the opposite of the serenity that I feel for the most part today. my current job, I mean, when I first started, it was the first 2 weeks were overwhelming because it was just a much different pace than my job prior. So, but that's sort of like evened out. But, I never know, things could change there too. But so for today, I'm grateful that things don't feel overwhelming, that I'm not at burnout, and that I have a program, because I'm planning to take classes again in the fall, and that can definitely push me into the overwhelm. But you have some very present overwhelm to share with us, and so I'd like for you to share with me and the listeners some more about that. And then, as always, we want to get into some of the solution and what we do to cope with those in healthy ways, to cope with these this overwhelm in healthy ways. So.
Thank you, Jillian. As many listeners know, I think we've talked about this before. I'm a recovered alcoholic. I don't have the desire to drink, but it took me getting sober to realize that I perhaps might have some other disorders that affect me, and one of them that I've had for years, since childhood, is anxiety. Mm-hmm. And anxiety, although it's a perfectly normal emotion for people to be anxious at times, like you just described a couple of situations where you had anxiety. I too have also, by the way, had panic attacks, and they feel like you're having a heart attack.
Yeah.
You feel that tightness in your chest. At least this is what I felt, and my heart started racing to dangerously high levels. And I was short of breath, and I thought I was having a heart attack, but I wasn't. It was a panic attack, and I've had them in the past. Luckily, I haven't really had those, in recent times. Except I did have a mild one not too long ago. Panic attack, very temporary. Now that I'm aware of what it is, so. Anxiety is a normal emotion. Everybody gets anxious at one time or another. Usually it's in a response of some sort to a threat or danger or, a situation where there yes. could be a problem, and the anxiety, fear, whatever kicks in. But when you feel threatened all the time, or you're constantly yes. in danger, and I'm not talking about being paranoid. I'm just talking about feeling anxious, because paranoia is a whole different thing. I don't think I'm only paranoid because they're out to get me. I don't think anybody's coming to get me, but my brain, I suffer sometimes with anxiety that is almost constant. But I deal with it, and I keep it at bay most of the time. 90% of the time I keep it at bay, but it's always an undertone there. It's like a hum in the background. And lately, though, I've been feeling kind of overwhelmed and got to the point of burnout not long ago. Work has been extremely busy, and I mean way above average, like doing 3 different jobs. I have 3 different companies. I've got stuff going on with all of them. My to-do lists are growing longer. And it feels like time is growing shorter, and I need to get stuff done, and there's one of me to go around. So I started to feel this sense of, overwhelm. And I'm getting my work done. Like, to the outside world who is not listening to this podcast, who just happens to see my work, people would say, "You're doing great work. You're doing good. You're doing a good job. This is great. No problem." But to my inside, my psyche and my physical well-being start to go downhill, and I can only give 100% to everything I do, whether it be this podcast, whether it be an event I'm producing, whether it be a consulting job that I'm doing, whatever. I try to give 100%. When I can't, anxiety kicks in and goes up a notch, because I expect 100% A+ results for myself all the time. So I'm a perfectionist caught in an imperfect world.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So I mean the last few weeks it's built up. Like, I got done with one major project. And I got hit with all the other ones that were waiting for the big one to get finished. So now the big one's done, and I got to hit all these little ones, smaller ones, or whatever. But they're important. They're all 100% of my giving.
Right.
You know, everything is as important as the next thing. I mean, that might be a part of ADHD too. Everything is equally important. Like the bowl of cereal in the kitchen is just as important as paying your rent. You know, everything is of equal importance. It all must be done right now, immediately.
That doesn't sound sustainable.
So, well, there you go. So I hit the brick wall like yesterday. I was on a business call with a good friend and professional colleague. And this person said to me, you need to take the rest of the day off. You really, you need a break. You know, you're pushing yourself too hard. You're putting out good work, but you're going to, you know, you're going to, I had hit the brick wall. I was feeling like if one more person asked for one more thing, I'm just going to go run in the woods and hide. Yeah. And that's the feeling of overwhelm and burnout. When you feel overwhelmed for a sustained period of time, and then you hit this sense of like failure, self-doubt, feeling trapped and defeated, that's the burnout part kicking in. And that's what I felt. I felt like I wasn't good enough for anything or anybody. So that's where I was at.
I was going to say, so I have some questions for you, and you did answer a little bit one of them. So one of my first question is, and I can relate to perfectionism too. It's something I struggle with. Knowing that you want to give 100 and plus %, it sounds like, but that ultimately will lead to burnout. Could you be okay with at some point of giving 90%? Because the thing is, if you're trying to achieve that level, and the external parties might not see that they might think that you're giving 100% when you don't feel like you are. If you get to the point that you're so burned out, you can give 0%, maybe better to back off a little bit and adjust your expectations of yourself. Just questions. And then the other thing is, so you mentioned some of the way that manifests for you, like what starts to show up for you when you're in that burnout mode, like what shortcomings might be popping up, or how do you know that you're either close to, or when you hit the wall, you know you hit the wall, but how can you sense that, like, ooh, I'm getting really close to burnout? And thank goodness you listened to that colleague who said, like, you need to take the time off.
Yeah, I took the rest of the afternoon off, and it did feel better. I felt like a pressure valve release a bit.
Good.
So one of the things that happens with burnout versus overwhelm, and we're talking about overwhelm, but burnout is
natural byproduct.
I think the podcast probably will end up being titled Overwhelm and Burnout, because those two go hand in hand.
Evil twins.
Unfortunately, yes. So when you hit the point of, you talk about recognizing it, when you hit the point of having a lack of enthusiasm for things that you love to do.
Yeah.
So if you absolutely, I love my work. I do work that is meaningful for me, and I happen to get paid for it. I don't have a job to go get paid. I have a career that allows me and gifts me with things to do that are right in my wheelhouse, that I could, they come easily to me. And I finally hit the brick wall where I have a lack of enthusiasm for the very thing I love. So that's a symptom of burnout.
Yes.
When I don't care anymore about the things I love, I'm burnt out. And when I give up. Now, you had mentioned an interesting point. What if you give 90% or 70% or whatever? I grew up in an environment where you don't shoot for a B or a C.
Yeah.
My parents, even though they didn't belong in the same room together, were smart people, in their own right. And my father was definitely an overachiever. And if I got anything less than an A in class, I'd hear about it. And I was surrounded by people that were A+ people. I had a lot of smart friends. So I was in an environment where, you don't stop short. You don't stop at mile marker 20 when it's a 26.2 marathon. You don't stop. You don't quit. You don't give up. and you don't give anything less than 100%. And I don't really compare and contrast myself to other people, but I have this vision of what I think it should be, 100%. And so it's not about competing. Yeah. I'm actually fairly non-competitive. I don't care what you're doing. I care what I'm doing. And I don't measure my success by the size house you have. I measure it by the size house I want, or whatever. It doesn't have to do with the neighbors. I know what I need for me. So I'm keenly aware of that. But I guess to circle back around and answer your question, I don't know how to give less than 100%. And what's funny is you brought up a very interesting point, because most people who work with me love my work. Yeah, sometimes it's difficult for me, I'll be honest. It's difficult sometimes to get people to start working with me on occasion. Like, it can be challenging because there's so much competition out there in the world for consultants and communication specialists and all that. But once I work with someone, they want more. They don't want to give up. They want more of me. They like my work. They appreciate my work. And when I'm giving, what I think is 100%, they're just amazed. And actually, if I fall short of my idea of perfection, people still think it's good work.
So that's kind of my point. I'm not suggesting that you should lower your standards. Like, you want to give your best work. I just think that maybe your expectations of yourself are too high and unrealistic sometimes. And if you check that with an external party who doesn't live in your head, they might be like,
how do I find one of the... No,
right.
I'm just kidding.
Like, you know what, Dom? I think your 90% is actually 100%. So, like, your 100% in your head might be 130 to somebody else. So I would never encourage anybody to, like, half-ass their way through anything or not give their best. But you have to balance that with your mental health and you not burning the hell out. So I think it's good to check in with, and for all of us, especially those of us in recovery, like somebody who doesn't live inside your head, to be like, hey, can I get your perspective on this? And they might be able to say, actually, I think this is amazing work and you're doing just fine. Don't push yourself any harder. Take a break.
The person that told me to take a break is a very successful consultant as well. And complimented me up one side and down the other about the quality of my work. It's just that I needed to work on this project just from a different perspective, which of course I wasn't seeing in the moment because I was stressed.
Right.
But just to make some twists to an already good piece of work. And I was beating myself up with that burnout feeling of doubt and helplessness and failure and all the stuff that comes with burnout. And I was being really cynical and negative about it. And this person said, you've got everything that it takes to be extremely successful here, and that's why I'm working with you. So just give yourself a break. That's what my first AA sponsor said when I did a fourth step. I know I usually don't talk about
specific
programs, but I'm in a 12-step fellowship. I have a sponsor, and the first words out of this person's mouth when I revealed my deepest life secrets is, you think you're the only one, and give yourself a break. So I don't know. Maybe I'm harder on myself and
I mean, I find most of us are, because I think I can't remember which episode it was that we talked about, like when I go in for an annual, like my annual review, right? My inner critic is like just waiting to hear like, oh, you suck, you're underperforming. And then I was always shocked to hear like to get higher marks than I expected. And then I'm like, wait a second, dude. And then I'm like, oh, I've totally got them snowed. Like, what? No, like maybe just give yourself some credit that you're doing a better job.
Maybe you're good at what you do.
Maybe you're good at what you do. That's also plausible. But for those of us who struggle with like, an inner critic, and mine's gotten quieter through the process of recovery, but most of us are our own worst critic. And that's why it's really important to check in with other people to get their perspective.
My inner critic was like Gilbert Gottfried.
Oh, jeez.
Yesterday, it was like, "You're not doing well.
Oh,
You stink.
Oh, no. Oh.
You're really bad at your job."
Oh,
It was awful.
That voice.
Was my inner voice.
No.
It was Gilbert Gottfried screaming at me, telling me
Oh.
how I'm awful at what I do.
Oh.
And I can laugh about it now because I took a break.
Right.
We're talking about shifting a little bit to solutions here for a few minutes. But one of the things that is very difficult for us overachievers, who people in recovery, I've met a lot of them. It doesn't matter what fellowship you're a part of or what recovery group you're in. We all are suffering from, at least it's a common thread, from overachievement and lack of giving ourselves credit for it. I won't say we're all suffering from low self-esteem because I'm pretty confident in myself most of the time. But so it's not a self-esteem issue. I feel pretty good about me, but I beat myself up about the product I produce a lot, which is, I guess, a form of low self-esteem in a respect.
In a sense, yeah. So there's a little trick.
A
little, and I've shared this, I'm sure, this little resource in other podcasts, but it's a self-compassion exercise that I love. And I know I've shared it.
Where were you yesterday?
Yeah.
I need a self-compassion exercise.
So Christina Neff, N-E-F-F, F as in Frank. I learned this from one of my prior therapists. So you can go to her website. One of her self-compassion exercises is talk to yourself like you would a friend. Super simple. You can keep it in your back pocket and you can use it anytime. Like if you find yourself in that self-critical mode, like, I'm not, this wasn't 100%. I'm not doing my best. I could do better. Blah, blah, blah. I suck. I'm a failure. Who would you say that to? A friend? Would you say that to a loved one? Like I would never say that to my friend, my child, my father, you, So if we can pause, that's one of my solutions, right? That's one of my tools that I can use. It's not a 12-step recovery tool, but it's just, there are many sources that I try to use to help get me out of those unhealthy mindsets. And so that's one of them. Like, just for the self-compassion and to be a little more kind, like try to channel that and envision, like, what would my dad say to me? What would my best friend say to me? What would my son say to me? They would not say those things.
That's very true. If I listen to other people and actually believe them, who talk to me about my work, I have to say and actually believe them.
Yes.
Not that self-doubt kicking in where I don't believe that I'm good enough, and we did a whole podcast, if you want to reference it, also on unworthiness. We'll reference that in the show notes. Unworthiness is
that was like our second podcast.
Yeah, that was
we're kicking it old school.
Kicking it old school. It's the truth, though. If you're not feeling worthy, so you're not going to listen to anybody who tells you you're really good at what you do.
Right.
You're not going to. You're going to listen to the Gilbert Gottfried guys. You're not good enough. No, you are good enough. The Stuart Smalley voice kicks in.
Dude, I just watched Stuart Saves His Family.
Gosh darn it.
People like me. I'm
like
good
me.
enough. I'm smart enough. And doggone it, people like me.
Oh, gosh. So recognizing and acknowledging my feelings is the big thing, is recognizing it. So I took pause for a moment and recognized my feelings.
Good.
And it's the first step in recovery is awareness. And then admitting the unmanageability is the second half. So I had to admit that I was not able to manage anything else at the moment. So what should I do? Should I keep pushing through the mud, or should I take a break and come back and have at it again? And that's something that I have a difficult time with. So take the break.
Yes.
Take the break. I'm going to say it one more time. Take the break when you need it. Because that way you'll have a chance to identify the source of the overwhelm and really kind of figure it out and pick it apart. You can't do that when you're in the midst of battle. That's why there's a general who's sitting back in a tent somewhere miles away looking at the battlefield, because the people in the battle they're fighting their own battles at the moment. They can't see the big picture. And it's really tough to see the big picture when you're caught in the overwhelm.
Well, when you're spinning like that,
right.
you can't see outside of it. So, so many of us get stuck in that we just can't seem to pull ourselves out of that tailspin. And when we need to take a break the most is when we feel like we least are likely to give ourselves permission to do so. Like, I can't. I'm too busy. I have all these deadlines. Well, okay. Well, I see the brick wall coming, so good luck with that.
Right, exactly. I'm headed for the iceberg. I'm on the Titanic
Right.
here, and they're screaming iceberg, and I'm saying, no,
I mean,
I got a
just mop the
ship
deck
to
one
run.
more
We got a
time.
whole ship full of
Right.
people here. We got to get there.
Let's rearrange the chairs while we're on it. Yeah.
But I could identify the source of overwhelm when I took pause. So
Yeah.
take the break, take pause, identify the source, and then something I did late last night before I went to bed.
Mm-hmm.
This was a great technique, and I have to remember it next time I'm feeling
Right.
overwhelmed,
Right.
is to sit there and really tear everything apart and put it back together, like all of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So now you identify the source, and you start looking at all these things that are stressors,
Mm-hmm.
and now to actually look at them with a new reality, like
Mm-hmm.
from the general's perspective, not the soldier in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at it in a general perspective, I was able to pick everything apart and say, you know what? That thing isn't really as bad as I thought it was.
Wow.
Oh, that thing wasn't as bad as I thought it was. It's only this.
Mm-hmm.
And then this and this. Well, I can put that one off and prioritize this one and just reorganize everything.
Wow.
And then set some boundaries for what you're willing to accept or not accept.
Right.
Um,
There's something else that I did. This just occurred to me. So this was actually when my brother died. Right after he died, I was experiencing some panic attacks too, and I realized like, oh, that can be a part of grief. But I would feel overwhelmed, and then like I'd get this insomnia, and then the panic attacks would kick in, and I'm like, well, this is not sustainable. I need to find a coping mechanism. So what I did is when I was in a calm state of mind, like during the day, I wrote, this is so Stuart Smalley-esque of me, I wrote some affirmations on a note card.
okay.
And I put them on my nightstand so that when those moments would kick in, when I'd wake up and start to feel anxious, I could read those messages.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something else, listeners, that you might be able to do, because it's hard sometimes to access those, because our amygdala is freaking out when we're in overwhelm or feeling fearful or feeling anxious. So sometimes we can't calm ourselves down as easily and access those.
My amygdala is like a 1970s cartoon character running to the music. It's just
And also on fire.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's just a little, I mean, that for me works because I just need to have that like little tool. And I still have it by my bedside, even though I haven't thankfully had, a panic attack or at night for a while. But I just wrote some affirmations like, I am safe. I am loved. I am never alone. And at that time, I really needed those to get me through, and it helped. So I'm like, I'm just going to leave this on my nightstand because I might need it again someday.
I got another one for you for panic attacks. This is a technique that is a yoga technique, and it's also part of cognitive behavioral therapy.
CBT. Mm-hmm.
So deep breathing exercises can help with panic attacks.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to have a panic attack, your breathing goes awry and your heartbeat goes awry. So some deep breathing exercises. There are several techniques out there. We can probably reference something in the show notes, Jillian, about that. There's breathing techniques that are de-stressing.
Isn't there like box breathing?
Yeah, box breathing, taking a breath, holding it for 4 seconds, letting it out, hold for 4 seconds, take one back in.
Mm-hmm.
Just practice some deep, meaningful breaths and just kind of close your eyes. The other thing is, making sure that you get away from the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean running away and not doing your tasks, because
Right.
I mean that would be totally self-defeating as well.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be back to beating yourself up again.
Right.
So I mean, just taking the break, though,
Yes.
and getting away from it, and perhaps shifting the mindset, doing something different. If you like, I like nature,
Yep.
I like to take walks or hikes, go for a walk.
Mm-hmm. Change your scenery.
Change the scenery. Exercise has been proven to be very good for stress, so
Yep.
taking a walk in nature is a double win.
Yes.
And I lead a pretty healthy lifestyle, Jillian. I mean, this morning I ate oatmeal, flaxseed, blueberries, and raisins for breakfast. I mean,
Yum.
I'm eating healthy. I'm sleeping. I try to maintain a healthy lifestyle. So what do you do when all that isn't working for you? Yesterday I treated myself to a healthy, but not as healthy as usual lunch. I and had French fries and with it and all. Yeah.
Also yum.
So I mean, I ate some food that was a little more comforting.
Sure.
Just to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And picking up a hobby or a task that takes your mind off of it. Like sometimes if I'm dealing with a lot of mental work,
mm-hmm.
I'll go for something physical.
Mm-hmm.
So I get my body moving.
Yeah.
If you're doing the body moving and you hit a brick wall with, you're in a construction business or you work in a physical field, you're a carpenter, whatever, you're working in a physical field. So now you need to take a break and do something for your mind. Mm-hmm. So maybe painting or something that would just exercise a different part of the brain.
Yeah.
That's kind of practicing some self-care techniques.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned reaching out to a friend and getting some support.
Did you read my mind? I was just going to say that again.
Well, go ahead and say it again.
No, you said it. I was
no,
like,
go ahead and say it.
Yeah,
say it.
What he just said, folks. Yeah. Reach out to a friend. Yes. Reach out to a friend.
Talking to somebody else who knows you
mm-hmm.
is so beneficial. The best part about having accountability partners and, close friends who know everything about you, you don't have to spend 20 minutes, half hour explaining leading up to the situation.
Right.
You could just say,
mm-hmm.
hey, I'm dealing with this, and they understand.
Yes.
So seeking support. And then organizing and simplifying is another technique.
Mm.
So when you get yourself calmed back down and you're grounded and centered, the next thing to do would be to organize and simplify, like the to-do lists and the calendars.
Mm-hmm.
My to-do list years ago used to be like 2 pages long.
Yep.
And you know what? They're starting to get there almost again, and that's why I'm feeling overwhelmed and burnout.
Mm-hmm.
What I need to do is, what's your most important task for the day?
Yeah.
I said task. Singular. Most important task of the day, and then everything else falls secondary. Or make to-do lists that are broken down and manageable.
Yes.
So that not everything is of equal importance on the same day at the same moment.
Mm-hmm.
There are priorities.
I don't know if that's an ADHD trait. I've gotten better too, but when I was younger, I would make this unrealistic list. And then what happened at the end of the day is I'd just beat myself up for being a failure and not doing it. Not checking enough things off my list. But I saw this funny meme recently, and I think it might have been like an ADHD page. It's like, when I do something like an extra thing, I write it down on my list and I cross it off for the extra dopamine hit. And I was like, that is so relatable.
Oh, yeah. There's actually some charts and studies that have been done on getting boosts of dopamine, serotonin,
mm-hmm.
That type of thing, and in a healthy way.
Yes.
So not doing
gambling
something, not going and getting drunk or
right.
getting in a relationship that you shouldn't be in,
mm-hmm.
or going to the casino and gambling away all your money. No, unhealthy dopamine is not good.
Right.
And if you're an alcoholic or using substances of any kind, the tendency is to go get that hit.
Yes.
To go fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have to find new and better and healthier coping mechanisms so that we don't have, one singular choice to go to.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people will say the phrase drug of choice.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go to your drug of choice. So
unhealthy man. Sorry, what?
Unhealthy relationships. So if you're feeling depleted, exhausted, you find yourself mentally distancing yourself from things that you like to do, normally would like to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you find nothing but negativity and cynicism in what you are doing, even if it's the greatest work, don't you think like, I don't know, Thomas Edison when he was trying to work on the light bulb, don't you think he probably ran into some moments where he felt negative about it after, try number 75? I don't know how many times, 150 times.
It was a lot.
There were an awful lot of times he was working on a light bulb, okay? So, you get discouraged. It's normal.
Yes.
But when you find yourself just caught up in the negativity and the cynicism, that's symptoms of burnout syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, what happens is your work suffers, and it becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Because now you're not putting out the 100% that you wanted to put out in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is, that's the logic behind take the break. Because if you don't take the break, you're going to end up taking the break whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Because your work's going to suck.
Right.
So that's what I found myself in. That's kind of what I did, and hopefully this helps somebody else.
Yes.
Some closing thoughts, Jillian?
Yeah, no, great topic, and I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm glad and a little sad that it was so relatable for you right now. But I know that you have some time coming up. You have some nature therapy and a getaway with some close recovery friends that's going to help to get you in a better, more serene place.
Yeah, you're right. Bringing that up, I was hesitant to bring that up, but that's actually something that, in America we don't talk about in a pleasant sense. For some reason, taking a vacation in America tends to be a negative thing. Like a lot of people in the United States, they say things like, we work here. You need to want to work. We need to work more. You need a hustle and a side hustle and a side hustle for your side hustle. And that's the way the attitude is in America, more. And then you wonder why people are addicted to things.
Yeah.
And you wonder why there's more stress and anxiety and depression and all of that. That's because we have this push attitude. Higher corporate profits, more work, money for this, more money for that, put in more hours, why don't you just work harder? Those types of things are self-destructive.
And that culture just leads to burnout. I definitely
So I am taking a 2-week vacation.
Good for you. Yes. How un-American of you.
How un-American of me.
I love it.
How un-American of me. I'm going to take 2 weeks off.
Good for you.
I have figured out, and didn't do it this particular past quarter, but I need a break about once a quarter. Now, I don't need a 2-week vacation once a quarter. That would be a lot of vacation, but I need a break of some kind to regroup and rethink, a different change of scenery. So I would encourage anybody who's listening to figure out a way to take that break. Get the break.
Yes.
Go change your scenery.
Embrace
take the long weekend.
Yes. Embrace your inner European. Sorry. That's they're more their culture. That's why my daughter and her fiance are moving there, because they value their time more than killing themselves to make more money. So.
And there are gurus out there who have figured out how to do like a 4-day work week and put out more productivity. I'm not one of them yet, but I'll be
something to
up
aspire to.
But putting in a shorter work week and actually having higher productivity.
Yes,
so
it's possible.
You got to take the break.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Thanks for putting up with my rant and rave today.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope this helps somebody. The reason we do this podcast is not for our own benefit, but for you, the listeners, so that perhaps you can relate to something that we've talked about, and perhaps even maybe find additional solutions we haven't found, and hit us up in the show in the blog there.
Yes.
We're easy to get a hold of. So
we are.
Thanks, Jillian,
Thank
for
you, Dom.
being with me today on this journey.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to take a break today for a couple of hours at least and enjoy some of the weather.
Good for you. And listeners, hope you take a break today. And until next time, we appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for listening. Till next time.